living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
From the whispering of the wind rattling fall leaves to the voices of loved ones who have since passed, distinct sounds are often ingrained in our minds forever. Hearing is one of our most important senses, and without it, our memories and daily living activities would be radically different. Today, we're going to talk about hearing loss and common issues that can happen anytime. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm Lisa Sather, your host. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Joining us today to talk about hearing loss and some common hearing issues is Dr. Hillary Carter of Comprehensive Hearing Services. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Carter.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, excellent. So let's first start our discussion today talking about some of the different types of hearing loss that can occur as we age. And I read that presbycusis is one of the most common types. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Presbycusis is a natural aging process of hearing loss. So as we get older, we have little hair cells in our inner ears, and those begin to die off or are just not working as well as they did at one point in time. Those help send the sound up to our brain to understand what's being said. So as those die off, our brain is not quite able to fill in those gaps or understand as much as it did at one point in time. So it's kind of a lack of clarity is what people tend to notice.
Okay. So talk about ear infections. So can an ear infection tend to cause hearing loss?
They can, and actually, interestingly enough, ear infections do tend to affect older adults as well as children. An ear infection is when there's fluid buildup on the other side of the eardrum, so in the middle portion of the ear. And when that fluid is there, the sound is reduced and not sounding as good, and it can be a sudden change. And speaking of sudden changes, anytime there is a sudden change of hearing, and especially if it's in one ear, you absolutely want to get that checked out. There can be some permanent damage that can occur, and there can be a window of time where we need to have some treatment taken place. So any sudden changes of hearing is absolutely something that needs to be checked.
Okay, good. You know, that reminds me also of a condition called swimmer's ear. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and
Sure.
hearing loss potentially?
Swimmer's ear is something is actually affecting the other side of the eardrum. So that's the outer portion of the ear where we can actually see problems. And it's generally like a yeast or a fungal infection that occurs in that outer portion of the ear to too much moisture. And again, is a treatable condition as well. And typically has quite a bit of pain with it. So of course, if there's pain there, you want to talk to your physician about that.
So how about this feeling of your ear feeling full? Can you elaborate a little bit about that and what causes that?
So it could be from fluid, it could be a variety of things that could give you that fullness feeling. It is definitely something to have evaluated because there are a variety of conditions that can cause ear fullness or pressure feeling. Sometimes it can be eustachian tube, sometimes it's that outer ear, sometimes the middle ear, but it is something that an evaluation would be necessary to kind of figure out exactly what's causing that fullness in the ears.
What about wax buildup? You know, some folks talk about that, and can that cause issues?
Absolutely. Of course, we always hope when we're having a hearing problem that maybe it is a wax problem because it's very easily treatable, and we can do miraculous things by removing that wax and helping the hearing. But yes, it can, and that's something, again, easily seen and treatable as well.
Okay. Now talk about tinnitus. What is this, and what causes it, and what are its characteristics?
So tinnitus is really any sound that does not originate from outside of us. So it can be a ringing, it can be a buzzing. Some people will experience a cricket sound or music sound. There's actually a variety of noises that people will notice. Typically it does come with hearing loss. So a lot of people that have hearing loss have tinnitus. Sometimes people think that tinnitus is causing the hearing loss. It's actually the other way around. But it is a condition that can indicate sometimes some other problems as well, but typically is a sign of hearing loss.
Okay. So are there any other types of hearing loss that people might want to learn about?
I think one other important one to talk about is probably noise-induced hearing loss. And that's from excessive noise exposure over the years. Noise-induced hearing loss is from a cumulative effect. So the more noise you're exposed to, the more hearing loss you could potentially have. It does occur right away though too. It's not something that if you had a lot of noise exposure when you're 20, it's not necessarily causing your hearing loss when you're 60. It can have an effect, but that hearing loss is actually pretty sudden or soon after that noise exposure when it occurs. So one of the important things about that is protect your hearing, because that is absolutely one that is preventable. So the more you're protecting it, the more you're preventing future hearing loss too.
Yes, of course. And how about ruptured eardrums?
So a ruptured eardrum would be a hole in the tympanic membrane or in the eardrum. It could be caused from an infection. That buildup of fluid needs to release, so it might be from that. It could be from a Q-tip use or something along those lines. So you really don't want to be sticking anything smaller than your elbow in your ear canal.
Yes.
And that is something that would need to be looked at and treated. A lot of times they will heal on their own, but can cause hearing loss at the time. And if it's not healing, it is something that can be, again, fixed medically. So.
Okay, good. How about airplanes? And, you know, folks talk about their ears popping when they're in an airplane or at high elevations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in our ears, in our middle ear, we have what's called the eustachian tube, which is the part that equalizes the pressure in our ear. So when we go up in elevations and we hear that popping sound, it's what equalizes the pressure. It allows for air to flow into the middle ear from, it's actually the back of our throat, kind of the back of the nose. If that's plugged up or the pressure changes too quickly, then you'll definitely get more of that big popping sound from that pressure change.
Okay, and maybe just in a couple of sentences, what's kind of the best way to pop your ears, you know, in an airplane or in a situation like that?
I think the best thing is definitely kind of opening and moving your jaw. Chewing gum can be an amazing thing, and just swallowing and keeping some movement in that nose or the back of the throat and the nose area as well to try and clear that out.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back to talk with you in just a second. So stay tuned to learn more about hearing loss and what can be done to correct it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Hillary Carter about hearing loss. So we've heard about the different kinds of hearing loss. Let's continue talking about what can cause hearing loss and some preventive measures people can take. I'd like to hear a little bit about decibel levels and why that's so important and how our viewers can understand how that can be harmful to their hearing.
Sure. So decibel is just a measurement of sound. And it is something, to give you an idea, like 30 decibels is kind of soft speech and somebody talking softly. Okay. 60 decibels is more of an average conversational level, so about what we're talking at currently. And then when we get up to like 90 decibels, that gets to be an area of concern, and it can be like a train sound, and very loud, and guns are up to like 120, 140 decibels. So the interesting thing about decibels is that it's what's called a logarithmic scale. So for each little increment we increase in sound, there's an exponentially more possibility of damage to the ears. Okay. Anything over 85, which typically 85 decibels, you can think of if you're needing to raise your voice, to be heard, you're probably at that 85 decibel or more volume, and you really want to watch how much time you're spending in there, because the more time you're there or the louder that sound, the quick one, the more likely some damage could occur. Okay.
So can hearing loss occur the result of a one-time event, or is it typically something that takes a period of time for it to happen?
It can be both. Okay. So a one-time event could technically be a shotgun blast. Could be loud enough sometimes to cause an immediate decrease in the hearing, or it could be extended periods of time like factory work or farm work or something where you're exposed to maybe a lower level but at a consistent long-term basis. Okay. So it can be either one of those can cause hearing loss. And unfortunately those one-time events, you never quite know when they're going to be. Yes. You know, the gunshot's not as a common one, but I have definitely encountered that and seen that. It's typically maybe more of your explosions or really, really intense ones that typically are going to cause that sudden one-time event type of a thing.
Okay, that's good information. So earbuds or earphones come to mind. Are there any issues with either of those?
There absolutely can be. The biggest thing is users. So it's how loud you're turning up the volume in those earbuds. Earbuds and headphones are safe to use as long as you're using them at a normal level. One kind of key to kind of give you an idea if you're turning it up too loud, one, there are limiters on a lot of things you can download. So if you're using a phone or an iPod or something along those lines, you can actually download a limiter so you can't turn it up too loud. But then also, if others are hearing the sound coming from outside of the earbuds, that is kind of an indicator that might be a little bit too loud, and you should definitely consider turning them down.
Good advice. So how about events like concerts or sporting events, and how do those rank in noise levels?
So those can definitely get quite loud. Typically they can be anywhere from 100 to 110 decibels.
Oh, wow.
I know one of the football stadiums has ranked as the highest decibel reading. I want to say it's the Seattle Stadium, but I'm not 100%
wow.
positive on that. But I want to say it's like 115 decibels that they've gotten their crowd into. So, and some of it will come and go. Stadiums, you know, if the team's winning, they're going to get a little bit louder.
Yes, absolutely.
The concerts are going to be a little bit more consistent.
Okay.
So again, it's how long you're there too. But ideally, hearing protection being worn there sometimes can actually make the experience even more enjoyable. Because you're able to hear actually some of the music a little bit more, or hear what you're wanting to hear with blocking out some of the more bothersome sounds.
Excellent. So you mentioned shooting a little bit ago, you know, gun sounds and gunshots. And so for those of us who engage in shooting and in using guns, what kind of recommendations do you have for that, for hearing protection, and, you know, any types specifically that should be used?
So there's a variety of hearing protection that can be used. The most effective is the one you're going to wear. So there are earmuffs that just go over the ears, and those can of course be worn. I know some individuals that shoot guns pretty regularly find those a little more challenging because they can knock them off as they're shooting their gun. So then you could do either the foam pieces, there are some custom options available. Really the most effective hearing protection is the one you're going to wear.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the biggest key. And ideally, anytime you shoot a gun, you really should be wearing hearing protection. Of course, the Montanans that love to shoot and hunt, and understanding hearing for hunting purposes, there are some filtered earplugs that are awesome. But ideally, if you're even shooting, when you're doing your target practicing, make sure you're having your hearing protection in. The more you're protecting it, the better.
Part of your routine.
Yep.
So what about operating heavy equipment or power tools? Can that damage your hearing?
Absolutely. And again, it's the amount of time that you're using them typically, and what you're using, because some are a little bit quieter than others, but hearing protection is definitely something that would be important to wear. And if it's something where you're in a shop or type of environment where you're switching equipment, sometimes having just that head hearing protection right near whatever equipment is louder, so you can put it on, take it off when you're done, can be a very effective measure of making sure your hearing is protected when you're using those equipment.
Okay, good. So talk about smoking, and can that impact your hearing?
There's definitely some research on smoking having an impact on the hearing. There has been more links of smoking does affect cardiovascular and in the body. So the less blood flow you've got, the less blood the ear is getting, and the ear is definitely a place where it's going to be one of the first things to be sacrificed because it's not as important of a body function. So that lack of blood flow can definitely start to damage those hair cells and have an effect on our hearing ability.
Okay, and maybe in a few seconds or so, talk about diabetes. That was interesting to me. Should folks with diabetes be a little bit more concerned about their hearing?
Yeah, there's more and more research coming out. There has not been a direct link of diabetes causing hearing loss. However, there is a lot of people with diabetes that have hearing loss. So it's not necessarily a causative thing, but there is a high number of people with diabetes that are much more likely to have hearing loss.
Okay, thank you. Stay tuned to learn all things about hearing aids. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Hillary Carter, an audiologist. So there are lots of hearing devices or hearing aids out there. Where exactly does someone start?
That is a great question. I will say it's very challenging to try and negotiate and figure this out completely on your own. It's definitely best to let a professional help you. Anymore, there are a lot of devices that can accomplish some of the same things, but it's still, there's different little pieces of the devices, there are features of the devices that can be more particular for certain individuals than others.
Okay.
And I think having a professional help you navigate that and figure out what's best for you is the best approach in that.
So a hearing professional would examine you before they even determine, or before anyone could determine what exactly the right device for you would be. Correct.
Yes, your hearing loss and your lifestyle are going to have a bearing as to what's going to be most appropriate for you. So somebody with the same hearing loss may not be recommended the same device depending on what their lifestyle is and what their needs are. Everybody's needs are a bit different. Everybody's budgets are a bit different. So it's important to really have an open conversation with the person you're working with and feel comfortable in that conversation, because that's how you're going to get the best for you of what you're needing and the best treatment option.
So how does lifestyle weigh into that? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so lifestyle is going to come into play a little bit of really into the bearing of the cost as well. But somebody that is more at home, just needing to hear the TV and needing to hear their wife or spouse at home and not doing a lot of activities, may not need the same device as somebody that's in and out of meetings all the time and in social environments frequently and needing to hear in those different environments. So those people would have different devices to really meet their needs most appropriately.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the different devices, how they, just generally how they might differ, how they look, how they work?
So anymore, the devices, there's a big range of devices. And I will say the looks of them have gotten so discreet and so small that most people are not noticing them nearly as much as you used to be able to notice them. There are behind the ear type of devices where the whole unit is going to go behind the ear with a thin wire or tube going down into the ear canal, or you could have the entire device in the ear canal, and some of them can go quite deeply into the ear canal as well, so they're really quite invisible. And then of course there's all kinds of in between. There are still some of the older styles available if somebody is just really comfortable with what they've had, but anymore there's a wide variety of styles that might be appropriate. The style can have a big bearing on the sound quality and what you're noticing as far as the sound goes too. So the hearing loss can help in a little bit of knowing what type of device would be most appropriate for that particular hearing loss in individual.
And technology comes into play too. I mean, iPhones, and how they interface with that. Can you talk about that? That was unique. I had not heard about that.
Yeah, so anymore with iPhones, we can have a direct connection to the hearing aids. So the hearing aids become a headset for the iPhone. So your phone calls come through both hearing aids and stream through so you can hear them very clearly and directly. Even better than sometimes people without hearing loss.
Oh, wow.
And then in addition to that, there can be an app that you can actually make some adjustments to it. So it could be extremely simple of just a volume control. It could be more detailed, depending on what you're needing and wanting. Some people are overwhelmed with some of those thoughts and ideas, and some people love them. And that's where definitely it's good to talk with somebody to figure out where do you fall on that and what are your needs for that. If you don't have an iPhone, their apps are still available for Android market at this point. And at some point, they're definitely working on getting the phone, the streaming going through the Androids as well.
Very intriguing.
Yeah.
So talk about insurance a little bit. Does insurance generally cover the cost of hearing aids for folks?
So most insurances do not cover the cost for hearing devices themselves. They do typically will cover for the hearing testing. It is a medical thing to have a hearing test done, so that is where we're not always looking for hearing loss specifically just to fit hearing aids. There's a lot that goes into what are we looking at as far as this individual goes and as far as their health goes, and how is the hearing impacting that? Is there some signs of other medical conditions that we're seeing with the hearing loss? Is there something else we need to look at medically, or is it purely just more of a presbycusis or a hearing loss that just needs treatment of hearing aids? So that portion is covered by insurances, but most don't cover for hearing aids. It's more rare, although it's always worth a call to check.
Okay.
Worst case they tell you is no, best case maybe there is some.
Sure, absolutely. So if a person does get a hearing test and decides they do need a hearing aid, they can be expensive. So are there any financial assistance programs or anything that can help with folks to obtain a hearing aid?
Yes, and it's a great conversation to have with that professional because they are going to be aware of what may meet your needs better. So being open and honest with that is very helpful. There are financing options, so you can have extended payments, some with interest and some without. In addition, there are some organizations that are available to help out. So the Lions Club is one that sometimes will help out. There's a Starkey Hearing Foundation, which is a hearing aid company. There's different criteria that need to be met, but again, that's where talking with a professional can really help and figure out what would be most appropriate for your needs and what avenue to kind of look at.
Wonderful. So in your experience, all the folks that you've gotten to see and help, has it really affected their activities of daily living? Have you noticed that with folks that have been able to get a hearing aid working for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most common things I hear from people is how much they are more involved in their life and how much they're maintaining that level of involvement that they want to maintain, which is wonderful. You never want somebody pulling away and not doing the activities that they want to be doing because they're not hearing as well. The other thing that's common for people to say is it's so much easier than they thought it was going to be, and it's not as, I'm going to say, obtrusive.
Yes.
People always are concerned. It's like others are going to know I have a hearing aid, and they're very turned off by it. They said the invisibility of them and the ease of them is a lot less than people expect and think, and it becomes so much easier. And I think one of the biggest things also I've had people say is, you know what, I feel more relaxed because I'm hearing easier, and it's just a more enjoyable experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
We want to thank you for tuning in this week and see you next week. In the meantime, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.